seekers of the supernatural. I'm Tony Sparrow, your moderator, of course, tonight, along with Ed and Lorraine Warren. Tonight what we're going to do is something a little bit different. I have some excerpts from the book, The Haunted, which was a book about a couple, a family, in West Pittston, Pennsylvania, back in the 80s. I'd like to, if I could, Ed, if it's all right with you, I'd like to read some of the excerpts from this book.
I think they'll find it very interesting, Tony.
Perhaps stop and ask you some questions
Right.
when I see something interesting.
That way we can get in depth into this whole case here.
Right. So I think what I'll do is I'll just start talking about this case. When dealing with the demonic, there's an important point to remember. Disbelief is the shroud under which the devil is able to carry out its work. While its existence remains hidden behind the veil of human logic and reason, its actions persist without intervention. Only through faith, the belief in that which cannot be proven, can we understand and ultimately conquer the devil. So, to ensure its success, it seeks to destroy the faithful, and in doing so destroy faith altogether. Cloaked in skepticism and doubt, the devil will freely wander our plane of existence, carrying out its objective to destroy mankind in a scornful act of vengeance against the God it has forsaken. Perhaps then their intense faith was the reason the Smurl family became the target of tyranny for the devil. And perhaps their intense faith is what has allowed them to survive. This is the Smurl case. Ed and Lorraine Warren, of course, first became involved in the Smurl case in 1986, nearly 13 years after the family from West Pittston, Pennsylvania, had first come under demonic attack. For the 13 years preceding, the Smurl family had endured an unending barrage of unnatural and terrifying phenomena. This family, model family, civic-minded and religious, was raped of a normal life and made to suffer incomprehensible tragedy at the hands of the demonic. The details of all the events in the Smurl case are too many to recount in this outline of the full story. Instead, significant events and relevant occurrences have been highlighted for the purposes of showing the motive, strategy, or sheer mercilessness of the demonic. Still, it is important to relay that for the most part, the horrific events continued on a near daily basis. Each day brought new terror. Some days were worse than others. Sometimes the events would seem to let up even for weeks at a time, giving the family the false hope that the problem had solved itself.
That's right.
But always it would return, each time further breaking the will of the family. In 1973, the Smurls had purchased and moved into a duplex in West Pittston, Pennsylvania. Janet, Jack, and their two young daughters, Dawn and Heather, occupied one half of the house, while Jack's parents, John and Mary, occupied the other. They lived happily for a short time in the house, taking joy in life's pleasures. It was soon after the move, however, in 1973, that certain unusual phenomenon began. As is often the case, the incidents began harmlessly. Drawers mysteriously opened and closed of their own accord. Unplugged radios blared loud music, and rocking chairs swayed back and forth when no one was in them. Now, right there, what's happening?
Those are the beginning stages of infestation. When people have a haunting that's going to occur, a really bad one, these are all the things that occur to those people. Doors opening and closing, footsteps, psychic cold spots, hearing what we call magic whispering. These are all the beginning stages, Tony.
But they're minor by comparison to what's going to happen.
Oh, yeah.
Then it says here, a strange and fetid odor lingered in the house, its source unknown. Claw marks scratched into wood appeared in the newly remodeled bedroom. As often as was possible, the family tried to attribute the events to logical explanations. Still, the incidents continued, even after the birth of their twin daughters, Karen and Sharon, in 1977. Could all that was happening be explained away with logical reasoning? Unfortunately, the odds were quickly turning on the Smurls. Is that what most people do?
Yeah, the Smurls were the all-American family, really. You know, they were civic-minded. They had, in fact, Jack Smurl had started the first girls' basketball team in West Pittston. They were all around American family. So people would say, well, what did they do to open up the doors? They didn't do anything. They are what we call the chosen ones. When I say chosen ones, this family here, very religiously oriented, good Catholics, good Christians, were picked for one purpose. God wanted to show his power over evil, and these were the people he did it through.
Mm-hmm. It says here, in one particularly horrifying event, Janet recalls being downstairs in the basement doing laundry when she heard a faint voice call out her name. She looked the basement over quickly, and the source of the voice, but she couldn't find anything. Again she heard her name, Janet. Her fear heightened as she spun around. She knew no one was home, yet she had the distinct feeling that she was not alone. When the voice called a third time, Janet responded, "What do you want?" The voice did not answer but continued to call her name. Now what's that all about?
You know how many people hear voices like this in their homes? They hear the wife pull up in a car, open the door, come in, set the groceries down. The husband will yell up, "You're home, honey?" He goes up, there's nobody there. These sounds come through telepathy. They're telepathically projected to the listener.
Now,
this is what she was hearing.
Now you also notice, Tony, now they're beginning to show fear.
Yeah, because it says here that she immediately located her rosary beads and began praying.
Yes.
And it says, in another incident, while folding clothes one afternoon, Janet felt a sudden chill enter the room. She glanced up and watched as a dark figure, human in form, glided past her and made its way to the living room. With a paralyzed fear, she just stood and stared.
Yeah.
After a few moments, she mustered the strength to follow the path of the dark visitor into the living room, which she found to be empty. Shaken, she decided to visit Jack's mother, Mary, who lived in the other half of the duplex. Upon entering the other half, Janet noticed that Mary was visibly upset. She sat upright in her rocking chair, gripping the arms of the chair. Before Janet could explain the strange event that had just occurred, Mary explained that a dark figure had just come through the wall and passed through the house.
Shadow ghost. Shadow ghosts are the most dangerous. They can actually solidify to the extent that they're almost like cement.
And of course, Tony, they could walk right through the walls.
Oh, no
Doesn't
problem.
mean anything whatsoever. But now both women are frightened, so now they're feeding it.
Says there were also incidents that occurred in full view of more than one family member. An exceptionally disturbing event occurred one night in the summer of '85. While lying in bed, curled up in Jack's arms, Janet suddenly felt a force grab her leg and begin to pull her from the bed. Jack recalls it was like a tug of war going on. I was holding on to her as hard as I could because I had no idea what the thing wanted to do to her. But the harder I tried to keep her next to me, the harder it pulled on her. Eventually, the force subsided on its own. That same night, both Jack and Janet were subjected to horrible pounding, mysteriously coming from the inside of their wall, and a stench so horrible filled the room, and they were forced to leave. Now, what do you think was happening there?
Yeah, well, what happens here is that solidification takes place around Janet's leg, almost as though something was grabbing her, and pulls her out of the bed. Fortunately, Jack was holding on to her. But most of the time, the husband can't even hold on to the wife. She's just pulled right out. These are, again, all the beginning stages of infestation. Much worse things are going to take place to this family. The levitations, the smells, the odor that they smelled.
Yeah, that's the demonic.
Yes. The inhuman spirits, devils or demons, hate human beings. They were created by God. They go into the dark areas during the light hours of the day. Where do they go? They go into the graves, into these old ancient graves. They love to see a body deteriorating. This was God's creation. That's why when people say, oh, this thing entered the room and I could smell this foul thing like garbage or something dead, that's because this thing has been in the grave somewhere.
Oh, boy. No family member was exempt, it says. The children complained of people floating around their beds at night and intense fluttering sounds as if a large winged beast were in the room. On more than one occasion, the younger children, Karen and Shannon, were tossed from their beds, thrown across the room like rag dolls. Jack would run to the screaming children, finding them in a heap on the floor, bruised and frightened. And it says even the family dog, Simon, was subjected to the phenomenon, coming to the aid of Janet, who was being choked by an invisible force. And then it just says the dog was, and it says a question mark. The incidents could no longer be ignored. Although they had talked about it before, Jack and Janet now giving serious consideration to the idea that their problem was beyond that of logic and reason. What they were experiencing was something unnatural. Events were getting worse, near to the point of fearing for their lives, in the lives of their family, they decided it was time to actively seek outside help. During her days, Janet spent researching the paranormal, and although she learned that her family was not only the one to experience these types of phenomena, the books offered no real explanation as to why these events were occurring, or how to make them stop.
That's true.
Their reading provided nothing more than the documentation of events or fantastical fiction about demons in the demonic underworld. It seemed as if no one really knew what was happening. The Smurls were finally given a break in their exhaustive search for help when in 1986 a professor from the local college gave them the name of Ed and Lorraine Warren. You know those two people?
Now, Tony, this is kind of strange. That professor at that college, we helped his mother.
Did you really?
At an apartment in New York.
And one time coming back from the Smurls' home, we were almost hit head on. And I swerved the car on the Henry Hudson Parkway. The other car hit the back of my car, knocked it out of control and right up onto the grass. And naturally we were out of commission. So the police came along and they took Lorraine to a telephone. And where'd they take her? Right where this professor had lived and where she had phoned him. Right where he lived.
Tony, in New York City?
In New York City.
New York City, like the biggest city in the world almost.
Yeah.
Then it says the Smurls were given a break. Then it says, without question, when dealing with paranormal, supernatural, or demonic problems, there are no two better suited people to have on your side than Ed and Lorraine Warren. As individuals, they each possess an immediate sincerity, extensive knowledge in their respective areas of expertise, and a powerful yet humble presence. As husband and wife married for close to 50 years, they are nothing short of a divine match. Ed is a certified demonologist, one of few men on this planet recognized for, capable of, and experienced in dealing with the demonic. Lorraine is a medium trance psychic, certified at UCLA for her superior psychic abilities. The hand of God himself certainly played a role in ensuring these two people came together. The thousands of thankful recipients of their assistance are a testament to that fact. For 50 years, Ed and Lorraine have selflessly helped those unfortunate, many who have had problems of a supernatural or demonic nature. They have been involved in thousands of cases, participated in hundreds of exorcisms, and collected countless pieces of physical evidence, providing proof of the existence of the spirit world, both good and evil. If anyone could help the Smurls, it was the Warrens. Finally, the Smurls would get some answers. After some lengthy telephone conversations with the Smurls, Ed and Lorraine decided it would be appropriate to visit the family at their Pennsylvania home.
Tony, this is the first case after Ed's heart attack in '85.
So Ed, you had your heart attack in '85, and the first case you went on was this
the first case, right? And after that.
It says here that once you arrived, it didn't take long to determine the nature of the problem. In short, the Warrens found what was a story told to be the family paralleled that of a typical demonic attack case. The phenomenon purportedly displayed in the household, coupled with the sincerity of this upstanding family, was enough for the Warrens to consider this valid and a serious case. Psychic evaluations conducted by Lorraine had revealed that there were indeed several entities involved in the Smurl case. 4 entities had been identified, 3 human spirits and 1 demonic. Although the 3 human spirits were of no less concern to the Warrens, they knew that what they were really up against was a demon. An entity that was never human to begin with. Tell me about that.
Okay, now this is the first day in the house. And Ed had brought, you know the box, Tony, that he has that has all the first-class relics in it?
Right.
All of those first-class relics have been given to us. We never actually sought any of them out. And we have all the papers from Rome concerning them. Ed took them up and he put them on the bed in the master bedroom. And he and I sat on the bed, and he put on this music, this chanting music. Gregorian chanting music. And he had it on real low, and we were saying...
This is provoking what's in that house. Evil spirits hate Gregorian chanting. They hate prayers.
And we
they
hate
the name of Jesus or God.
And we were praying. We were saying prayers out loud together. And with this, Tony, there were louver doors on the closet, but the carpet was so thick, and they never had the doors planed down, so you had to like pick the doors up, you know, to open them or close them, and going back and forth like crazy, the doors were. Then the television lit up, but it wasn't plugged in. Then all the
Tells
things,
about this in there.
then all the things that were on the bureau began to dance all around.
Let me just read this too. It says, as if dictating the past 13 years of the Smurl's family experience, the Warrens laid out the different stages, strategies, and common procedures used by the demonic in an evil campaign. As the Smurls had experienced, the phenomena had started relatively harmlessly. This is referred to as the infestation period of a demonic attack. The demonic entity is making its presence known to its target. It will slowly and methodically create disturbances through the manipulation.
It's like a shark. If you're in the water, a shark doesn't attack you immediately. It circles you. It looks at its prey. It wants to make sure that it can't harm it. And only when it's sure will it attack that prey. That's what this was doing here.
Yeah, it says it will slowly and methodically create
Right.
disturbances through the manipulation of the physical. It'll levitate objects, wrappings on the wall, disembodied footsteps, as well as by exploiting weaknesses of the psyche, creating an atmosphere of anger and fear among those involved. In either instance, it is careful not to expose itself too quickly. Perhaps it is that the demons enjoy reveling in the slow torture of its subject,
They do.
or maybe the demonic entity must first produce fear and energy which it will later harness to manifest even more terrifying phenomena.
Yes.
Is that true?
That's right.
Yes.
As a person
Yes.
becomes frightened, Tony, they throw off psychic energy into the atmosphere, which a spirit like this will use as a fuel to manifest more phenomena.
That's why it's so much better, Tony, to rely on your faith, or make sure that you have your faith to rely on.
Well, it's hard, for people who have never experienced anything like this to say, well, I'm not going to become frightened.
Right.
You're going
Oh,
to become
yeah.
frightened
You're
if
gonna-
you're, if you're
period.
normal.
Yeah.
Yeah, period.
Yeah.
It says here the fear generated during that infestation phase becomes the gateway to phase 2, oppression.
Right.
It says the purpose of the oppression stage is to weaken the body and mind, and more simply, to destroy the human will so it can no longer fight back.
Well, when they're talking about oppression, what they're talking about here is it's similar to having an invisible being alongside of you, whispering negative thoughts, discouraging thoughts, frightening thoughts into your mind. That's where the oppression comes in.
It's going to have people plot against each other within that Christian
Anger,
family.
fights.
It says it is during this stage that the devil begins to reveal his true self. Then it says here the activity suddenly stopped. Jack, having seen the ability the Warrens had to start and stop the demonic activity, felt washed over with a wave of relief. The next step for the Warrens was an obvious one, now having proven to them that this was indeed a true case of demonic infestation. They suggested to the Smurls that they contact a priest at their church and have an exorcism performed in the house. Janet contacted the church as the Warrens instructed. Smurls began being a religious family and an active in church, were hopeful that an exorcism would rid their family of the demon. The response they got from the church, however, was not the one they expected.
Nope.
Both Janet and Smurl and Lorraine tried on several occasions to get a priest from the local Roman Catholic Church to visit the house. Every attempt was unsuccessful. What happened, Lorraine?
One time after traveling all the way down there to meet with this priest and talk to him, he told me he didn't have time for me that day because there was a couple coming that
That was the chancellor we were talking about.
No, this is the parish priest first, honey. That he didn't have time to talk with me because of the fact that he had to instruct a couple that were going to be getting married.
It says, without even taking the time to say so, the church had made it very clear that they wanted nothing to do with a case of demonic attack and no intention of performing an exorcism.
No, they didn't.
In the 13 prior years, the Smurls had experienced every possible terror as part of the demonic attack, including the physical destruction of their home, mysterious bite marks appearing on their bodies, strange shadow creatures roaming their house, being thrown across rooms by invisible hands. As horrible as those events were, they seemed to pale in comparison to the realization that their own church had turned its back on them.
And they didn't lose faith.
That's amazing that they didn't.
They did not lose their faith, Tony. Not once did they lose their faith.
Because it says here their entire lives had focused around the church.
It did.
The Smurls
It
passed
did.
the values of the church down to their children as they had been passed to them through parents. They attended Mass every week and had remained heavily involved in church activities. The faith in the Smurl family was remarkably strong.
It was.
And now, when they needed its help the most, the church had denied them. It was painful, angering, and frustrating all at the same time. The news came as equal surprise to the Warrens, whose faith in the Roman Catholic Church is of particular relevance to their livelihood and spiritual well-being. Ed and Lorraine told the Smurls to remain faithful. They would contact a friend of theirs in the church, whom they had worked with on several occasions. He would help.
Right.
Meanwhile, the Warrens arranged for an exorcism from another priest, and the Smurl house was fervent with demonic activity at that point. It was as if they were being punished by the demon for seeking help. Activity heightened in both frequency and intensity. In what was likely the most terrifying experience in his life, Jack recalls the night he was physically and sexually attacked by a succubus.
This was
tell me
a
what that
horrible.
succubus is?
Yes, a succubus is a demon who attacks the male physically and sexually. The incubus attacks the female physically and sexually. These are the most horrendous types of attacks, as you'll hear Jack's description of it now.
It says here, the following quotes were extracted from a taped interview with Jack Smurl, and this is what Jack says. To be honest, I even hate to think about her. Her skin was paper white, but it was covered in some places with the scaly surface I mentioned, and then at other places with open sores, the kind you'd think a leper would have or something. And these sores were running with pus. She had long, white, scraggly hair, and her eyes were all red, and the inside of her mouth and her gums were green.
Yeah, awful.
Some of her teeth were missing, but those she had were very long and vampire-like. Then she mounted me in the dominant position and started riding me. That's the only way I can describe it. I don't remember feeling anything at all, other than panic and complete terror.
Isn't that horrible?
I could tell she was having orgasms because she would give little jerks and her smile would broaden. Then she vanished, just like that, just vanished.
Well, again,
it's
you know,
awful.
Jack is calling it a she here. It's an it. It's not a she. It's not a he. It's something that has never walked this earth. It's something horrible, ugly, filthy. It doesn't enjoy the sexual act. It's an insult to God's birthing act. That's what it's all about.
But if you ever
The creation of birth. It's an insult to it.
But if you ever met Jack,
Oh, he didn't want to even describe this or talk about
and if
it.
you ever met the
No.
type of man he was, to have that happen to him.
In fact, when he would go on a couple of national shows, these talk hosts thought it was a big joke, and they'd start joking about it. He was humiliated, of course. And
Oh,
he didn't want to talk about this at all. He said, I don't want to talk about the succubus attacks.
Says-
But I know for a fact that even after he left the first house, that he was attacked on at least 6 other occasions similarly.
This is Jack contacted Ed Warren in the morning and explained the previous night's events. With growing concern, the Warrens brought in Father Robert McKenna. As a traditional Roman Catholic priest from Connecticut, Father McKenna had been involved with the Warrens for many years and performed countless exorcisms. The Warrens now asked their friend to help the Smurl family in expelling the demon from their lives. The arrangements were made, and Father McKenna arrived at the Smurl home in Pennsylvania. After a brief conversation with the family, he donned his vestments and began the formal rite of exorcism. Father McKenna moved from room to room, sprinkling holy water and reciting holy words in Latin. He carried with him a crucifix, a large rosary, and a relic of a saint. After he completed the inside of the house, he moved to the outside, where he performed the same rites on the plot of land surrounding the house. Once the exorcism was complete, the Smurls thanked Father Robert McKenna, and he packed up and returned back to Connecticut. Although the exorcism had proven temporary relief from the demonic attacks, it did not rid the Smurls of the problem completely. The Warrens kept a close watch over the Smurls, and soon were hearing reports from the family that activity had once again resumed. Levitating objects, the return of the fetid odor, and wrappings on the wall marked the return of the demon. The family was crushed. Both the Warrens and Father McKenna had warned them that an exorcism is not always successful, but the Smurls so hoped that this would be the end of the problem.
Right?
Again, Father McKenna was brought to the house for a second attempt. As in the first exorcism, he blessed each room, repeated the exorcism prayers in Latin. At the end of the exorcism, he added a special prayer for the Smurls that the Lord might grant them peace from the demon and allow them to move on. The Smurls were again at peace. Over the next few days and then weeks, the family began piecing their lives back together. They had endured a demonic barrage for 13 long years and had come out on the other side intact and stronger in faith. But like the last exorcism, the peace didn't last. The hold the demon had on the Smurl family was one of the strongest the Warrens have ever encountered. So those two exorcisms
were
Two
not
exorcisms
successful.
didn't do it.
No, they did not, Tony.
No, I think the reason that it didn't do it is because God wasn't yet ready to show his power. His power was to come, and in a great way.
Oh, yes.
All right, so here at the end it says going public. This last little part here
Yes,
says,
it is.
it was becoming too much for the Smurls to handle. After more than a decade of torture and no assistance from the church, the family was exhausted and didn't know how much more they could endure. After much contemplation between Jack and Janet, they decided it was time to take their story public.
Mm-hmm.
The Smurl family made several appearances on a talk show, had a local newspaper write an article, and had their story told in a book in collaboration with the Warrens. That's the book, The Haunted.
Right.
Their hope was that someone who could end their problem once and for all would hear their story. They had also hoped that the church, which was still providing no assistance in the matter, would be, for the lack of a more appropriate term, shamed into helping.
And they were
What
shamed
happened?
into it.
Well, Tony, one man that we never even knew, who was in Rome, who studied to be a Roman Catholic priest, who left just before ordination, but had made many contacts in Rome during that period of time. He left because of health reasons within his family. He has a huge Catholic bookstore in New York City. He read the book. He was appalled by what he read. He wrote a letter and sent the book to Cardinal Ratzinger at the Vatican. We got a copy of that in the mail. We went down to the Smurl home. The very night that we got that, we were going down there for dinner with them. And now they had moved to Wilkes-Barre. So we kind of laughed about it. Yeah, imagine.
Right.
Nobody else is helping. Why is Rome going
Why
to...
would Rome listen to this man
Yeah. Who
sending
is
a
this
letter?
man?
But God works in strange ways.
So,
Cardinal Ratzinger took the bull by the horns, got an exorcist. They sent him right there to the
Holy
Smurl
Week.
home.
it was done Holy
And
Week.
here's the kicker. The very priest that didn't want to help them in the beginning told them that he didn't want to be bothered. There's a knock on the door. Mrs. Smurl opens up the door. Here's the priest. Got a box of candy in his hands. Well, Mrs. Smurl, how are you?
He's being
Well,
nice.
I've got
Even
some
the bishop came.
good news for you. And they don't understand why this guy's there because he wasn't going to give them any help. I brought you a little gift, a box of candy, and he said, the good news is that Rome is intervening for you. Cardinal Ratzinger is having an exorcist sent to your home. That exorcist was sent there, the home was cleared, and the family has lived happily ever since. That was not in the book, The Haunted,
No.
because at that time there was no closing.
There was no closing at
There
that
was
time.
no
no closing
closure
at
on
that
the
time.
case.
But today they're doing fine.
They're
But
great.
that was very painful to write, Tony. Being a Catholic, having this family strong in their Catholic faith too, to write a book, and in a way you were going against your church.
Right.
No, the church was going
Against-
against the teachings of the Bible, Lorraine.
Yes, that's true.
The Bible states that Jesus Christ had performed exorcisms while he was on earth, that he did cast out devils. Many of the priests in the rectories today, if you said to them, Father, do you believe in the devil? You'd see a little smirk come on many of their faces. Not all of them,
No.
but you'd
Some
see a
of them.
smirk.
Some
And they
of
would
them.
condemn their fellow priests for even believing in such things as devils and demons. That's medieval. That's
Right.
ancient.
I'm glad to see that they're better now.
They
We're
are
just
much
about out of
better.
time. Actually, we're out of time.
Yeah,
So I'm glad it all worked out in the
it
end.
worked out wonderful.
Lorraine,
Thank
you want to
God.
give our P.O.
Yes.
box to anybody?
Yes.
Really quick?
Yes. Please send any of your correspondence to the Warrens, P.O. Box 41, Monroe, Connecticut, 06468.
And on that note, I'd like to thank everybody for watching tonight. For Lorraine Warren, for Ed Warren, for Charter Cable, I'm Tony Spera. Good
Good
night.
night.